we will not optimize our growth if the entire industry doesn't come together. And I include racetracks in that too, which is why I included that in my upfront. It's important to grow driver brands.
So Steve Phelps, the president of NASCAR, and Steve O'Donnell, as Crasher said, the two Steves, hashtag the two Steves, or just the Steves?
The Steves.
Spent about an hour Saturday afternoon in the Phoenix International Raceway Media Center, asking a number of questions from the numerous press corps that were in the room. And the first thing that Steve Phelps addressed was the media rights. And we've been talking about the media rights, how coming up the end of 2024, that the media rights will be up for NASCAR. And typically you'll have at least some idea where it's going once these media rights are up with Fox and NBC and the other entities. So he wanted to address that just out of the gate. This is Steve Phelps talking about the media rights and where it might be available following the current relationship with Fox and NBC. Steve Phelps and the Freak Nation.
One thing I want to talk to right up front, and I'm sure there may or may not be a question on this, is where we stand with our media rights. Our media rights, the amount of interest in attaining our media rights for 25 and beyond exceeded our expectations. It is our expectation that not only having a great result with the CW, with our Xfinity series, and what's going to be an incredible 33 race schedule on broadcast television, we believe that we're going to have a very strong result with media partners that will look at a combination of broadcast, cable, and streaming to some degree. What that looks like, I don't know. Are we getting towards the end of this process? We are. Did I think that we would have a result earlier? I did. But we haven't. It's an incredibly competitive marketplace. But with that said, I want to assure all our race fans, anyone who's listening, and certainly the media corps here, we have had tremendous interest in our sport.
That, of course, is Steve Phelps, the president of NASCAR, joining us here in the Freak Nation, part of the press conference. We'll have more sound video from those guys coming up in moments. Statman, what do you take from that? Do you take that they're not at the point where the number is right with the entities that will be broadcasting NASCAR after this agreement is done, or that they're legitimately trying to siphon through those that are interested?
As you hear on my favorite podcast during the week, the answer to all your questions is money.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think that that's a problem coming up, especially when he threw in the idea of streaming and all of that. I think also I have to believe that the number of races is at issue. And if they're going to have 33 races or 23 races or whatever it's going to be, the broadcast partners have to know, what am I bidding on? And maybe that hasn't been decided yet.
Again, this isn't for next year. This is for 2025, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Beginning in 2025.
We know what the schedule is for 2024. Statman hit the nail on the head. These guys have to think so far ahead to where that they're thinking, or they're discussing about either to go with a full schedule again or to cut back. So they've got to be on point when they're having these discussions with Apple, Amazon, NBC, CBS, ESPN. They've got to be having these discussions.
And for anyone who's in their car listening right now or watching on TV, shaking your head, they're not going to go to Amazon. Don't count it out. It is being discussed. I mean, the NFL is doing so many things now. Who's full-time Apple? It's a soccer league.
Major League Soccer.
Is it Major League Soccer? It's not Premier League? Okay.
No,
so it's all on the table right now. It could be full-time. It probably won't be, but it could be partial time on Amazon. So anything is possible moving forward.
Yeah, I don't throw Apple in the mix because Apple, from what I understand, their sales of the iPhone 15 have been flat, and they're they're now charging you if you want to sync your phone to your computer through iTunes. They're charging you to do that now.
You're just not an Apple person.
Let's don't dig that rabbit hole, guys. Focus. Squirrel. Come on. Statman, Crasher, back here.
See, the iPhone 15 was the shiny thing in the grass.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? I had a conversation with a fairly high-ranking personnel with California Speedway, and I will elaborate more on this conversation. Statman's scat. Hold on. I don't want to listen. Statman's scat is about this. I don't want to do this.
Just let the scat play.
Yeah, I'll let the scat. No. I don't want to go. I don't want to get into that because Statman's scat has something to do with California Speedway and where he sees it going. Steve Phelps answers that, and I've got some conversation that I had with a high-ranking official with California Speedway. Steve Phelps was asked about the star power of the NASCAR Cup Series, and specifically these four dudes coming into this afternoon's race where, frankly, there's not a whole lot of controversy, not a whole lot of rivalries going on. Does it matter?
The responsibility is with NASCAR. The responsibility is with our race teams. The responsibility is with our drivers. And I don't. I think that as we move forward, putting things in place that will allow for this success there is important because we will not optimize our growth if the entire industry doesn't come together. And I include racetracks in that too, which is why I included that in my upfront. It's important to grow driver brands. And listen, I've heard from others that from the race teams saying, hey, we want to build our own brands as race teams. I'm for that too. If Hendrick Motorsports can build Hendrick Motorsports and it leads to more engagement from our race fans, I love that. But I do know that drivers becoming more popular, increasing driver star power is absolutely going to grow the sport as well. And so we need to make sure that we're putting things in place that will allow that to happen.
So it wasn't necessarily the question that was asked about the four championship drivers being non-controversial, because the other Steve was the one who answered that one. And he said, do they need to be? I mean, right now we've just got a little bit of a different audience going on in stock cars, in racing in general. And these guys have their own kind of star power without feeling the need to be constantly controversial. The guys that are controversial will continue to be on this side of the fence, and they will continue to race in the series. Whereas it just so happens that this year, the four championship drivers, they just beat to their own drum, and it was fine. It was fine on track. You still saw some emotion, whether it was tears after the race from Ryan Blaney or getting completely hot-headed in his helmet with 30 laps to go because Ross Chastain was driving him crazy. So controversy doesn't necessarily need to be what is constantly the topic or the MO for motorsports. Every single driver has their own personality and therefore their own following because of their personality. But going back to personalities in general, like you just heard Phelps talk about, yes, it's the responsibility of not just the drivers themselves, not just the teams, but the series and the media partners as well to tell better stories and to get more into the personalities. They recognize it, and that will be a target moving forward.
The bigger issue is that the drivers need to, and NASCAR wants them to build social media. And if they can build larger universes in social media, then they could sell that to their potential media partners in these contracts across these tables. So the branding is so important in this day and age that NASCAR, they can't depend on NASCAR doing all the branding growth.
Mm-hmm.